Good evening. Right now, Metro Police are desperately searching for the person or people responsible for killing a man and a woman.
I got a male down in the middle of the street.
Breaking news now, a triple shooting leaves 2 dead.
Never expect for somebody to tell you your loved one was murdered.
This Labor Day will mark 42 years that have haunted the St. Cloud family.
30 years. 30 years this family has waited for answers.
A couple months go by, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you really start to struggle with the idea that the case might not get solved and that somebody might get away with murder.
It's very unfortunate that we have any cold cases at all, and certainly unfortunate that we have as many as we do. And that's why Ryan's work and the work of Project Cold Case is so important.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. You recognize the face next to me by now. Lorena Inclan, Action News Jax, who you sure recognize from the news regularly, but also I think this is now, what, the third time?
Yeah, I think this is the third time.
Joined us.
Yeah.
So we really wanted to get back and tell these stories, follow-ups on these stories that you've done, that we've been able to get, raise awareness for in the community. This week we're going to talk a little bit about Vera Sullivan.
Which was the third case actually as well that we did.
It was the third case that we did.
When we started this partnership.
And we'll get into the details about it, but you and I, we were trying to figure out which case to do, and without even realizing it, we both kind of came together at the same time, like, what about Vera Sullivan's case? Right. And it just so happens that the case is hitting 32 years, like as we speak. Vera Sullivan went missing in early March 32 years ago, and her body was discovered on March 22nd, 32 years ago. So it seems fitting that this be the case that we talk about, and try to, again, raise some awareness and bring some answers. To give you a little background on the case, what we're going to do is we're going to replay Lorena's segment from Action News Jax, which was back in...
It was in 2017.
2017, December of 2017. So take a look at this, and then we get back, we'll talk more details about it.
Basically right up here in this clearing. Okay. Like right up in here.
Tamika Jackson took us out to this wooded area near Clanzell T. Brown Park near Moncrief Road. 30 years ago, her mom's body was found here, rolled up in a carpet. Jackson was 7 years old.
Do you feel like coming back helps you cope with?
Yeah, it's actually even this very moment, this very day is therapy.
During our interview, Jackson would get quiet as she remembered all the things her mom didn't get to see.
Let me celebrate my mom's birthday with her. I don't get that. We don't get that. My siblings don't get that.
The busy mom took the bus every day from her apartment just behind Clanzell Park to the historic Seminole Club in downtown, where she was maitre d'. On March 3rd, 1987, she never made it. 3 weeks later, Jackson's older brother found his mom's body in the area known as a popular shortcut.
We believe it was blunt force trauma, but there were some other indications that there might have been some more trauma. But of course, she was in advanced stages of decomp.
These are photos of what the scene looked like in 1987. Action News Jack's Sky Vision drone shows us just how much it's changed in 30 years.
We had looked at several suspects over the course of time. None of them really panned out to be anything that we could put charges on.
Police released this sketch of a man they were looking to question. Last month, the case was featured on ProjectColdCase.org and its Facebook page. The exposure generated a tip related to this sketch.
Someone revisited the case, looked at that sketch, and thought maybe there might be a connection.
Police are vetting that tip right now. Sergeant Dan Jansen also tells me they're reprocessing some evidence, but they still need your help. Jackson knows someone watching has answers.
Did she suffer? Was it quick? Those are the things that keep me up at night. Was it quick, or did you torture her? I need answers. I want to know.
She tells me she'll never lose hope that her mom's case will someday get solved.
Come clean. You'll feel much better about it. You can sleep better at night with a clear conscience. Nobody deserves that. Nobody deserves that.
All right. I mean, let's talk about it.
Yeah, that was that case, and I was telling Ryan right before we went live. I remembered how strong Tamika was to go to the scene where her mom was found in a rolled up carpet in the woods. Yeah. And she was telling me there, as you heard, that it actually helps her cope, and it's almost therapeutic for her to go out there. And she was, 7 years old when it happened?
Yeah.
And one of the shocking shocking parts of this case that made it onto the podcast version of this story, I believe, that it was her brother who found his own mom in the woods, ran home to tell people what had happened.
Yeah, I mean, this story was heartbreaking from the beginning, because Tamika, who we've gotten to know a little bit, you got to spend a lot of time with, is just an amazing person. She is. Such a sweet woman, and she's 7 years old, 8 years old. She's a kid, and she tells the story of her dad, like running into the house one day and grabbing a gun and telling Tamika, "Lock the door. Don't answer the door for anybody. I'll be back." And she says, "What's going on?" And he says, "Don't worry about it. I'll be back."
He had just found out that she was found in a panic. And you imagine his mindset, and it had been 3 weeks?
Yeah, it had been 3 weeks. So so Vera Sullivan's 37 years old. She's a maitre d' at the Seminole Club in downtown Jacksonville, which is, was a historic club. I mean, I've never had the opportunity to go there, but I've heard stories about
a lot of wealthy people would go and hang out there.
Yeah, and have lunch. And she was well known and well liked. Her boss, she basically March 3rd, she goes to work or is on her way to work. When she doesn't show up for work, the boss is like, "That's not like her." She was a hardworking woman, and when she said she was going to do something or be somewhere, she was there. She just disappears, vanishes.
Right.
So 3 weeks go by, and we have we were able to find this newspaper clipping. It drives me crazy. The Times-Union doesn't archive any of their newspaper clippings, but so this is the Tampa Bay Times picked this up. Body found after sister's dream. So the article states that Vera's sister had a dream about her body being in a field somewhere, and so Vera's sister and Vera's 15-year-old son go out searching fields near the house,
and they're the ones who find her.
They're the ones that find her.
And after people were searching, I mean, law enforcement was involved trying to find her, but it's her own family who says, "You know what? I'm going to go out and search for my family member," and that is incredible, because a lot of family members, we've seen a lot of missing persons cases where family members go out to search, and I've never heard of a case where the actual family member finds.
Yeah. It was, I'm sure, very traumatic for Vera's son and sister. I mean, she was wrapped, according to Sergeant Jansen in the segment with you. Bad decomposition of the body. She'd been wrapped up there for a while. It made it hard to identify and then collect evidence. I had written down here some notes, kind of where it was. She was last seen at a bus stop at 36th Street and Moncrief Road. And then her body was discovered near Moncrief and Gulf Air, and you went to
We did, and to paint that picture for you guys, you saw it in the story, but that's, if you're familiar with Jacksonville's north side, that's right near Clansell T. Brown Park. Right. There is a basketball court there. A lot of kids go over there and play nowadays, and there is a shortcut behind that park, and it's very well known in that community, even back then, that people would cut through that wooded area. I think it was called the Cut.
The Cut, yeah.
And so they would cut through there to get to the bus stop and continue on. It saves a lot of time.
Instead of having to walk all the way around.
Right.
Because there were some apartments there. Were those her apartments?
Those were, I believe they were called the Palm Terrace apartments back then. I think they have changed, the name has changed. But she lived near there. Yeah, exactly. And
it was just a shortcut.
Yeah.
And it was nothing more than a shortcut that she did all the time. And so did a lot of other people.
Exactly.
After her body is discovered, the sheriff's office released a composite sketch a person they wanted to talk to.
Right.
You know, yeah,
This is it right there.
Yeah, they basically, some witnesses came forward and said this man might have been in the area or around that area in or around the time that she either disappeared or was, discovered.
May have information.
Yeah, may have information. To our knowledge, they never identified who that was or spoke to him.
No, and they throughout the course of this case, and even in the early stages, JSO did look into several suspects, and that was the exact wording used by the detective: several suspects. But unfortunately, none of them, they weren't able to put any charges on any of them.
Yeah.
But when Project Cold Case came into this case and got to know Tamika, you guys did a spotlight, and when you did the spotlight, thanks to that spotlight, a tip was generated.
Yeah, it was. That's why we do these. Is always
Absolutely.
hoping for the tip would come in, and
That's huge.
Yeah, we in October 2017 we did a spotlight. You can see it on the screen there. That's what our spotlights look like, and it was just a written, interview with Tamika and with information on the murder and asking the public for help. The way these work. A family member submits a victim to through our website, and then as we write up these spotlights, or we have volunteers write them up, and we try to do them once a week, but sometimes it's just hard to keep consistent with it, but we do them as often as we can. And the real way it works is we share it on social media. That's on our website, projectcoldcase.org. But then we share it on our social media pages. We ask our survivors and followers and those that like our page to share it on their page, because the goal is, of course, to reach as many people as possible, hoping to reach the right person. One of the keys to that is the family sharing these spotlights and getting their friends and family to share the spotlights and trying to maximize the reach. And it worked in this case where literally the next day after the spotlight posted on our website, someone called Crime Stoppers with a tip. That tip was sent over to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office and was vetted. Now, they didn't make an arrest in the case, so I don't...
But that's more than this case has had in decades.
Yeah, and sometimes the tip itself, it leads to just more investigation, and it takes longer.
And that is huge,
right?
Because then it's the opportunity for a fresh set of eyes to look at this case again, thanks to that tip. So even if that tip doesn't lead to anything, like you mentioned, now the case file is open. Somebody's looking at it, and something may come about. But it was amazing to see the power of social media and how that occurred. Unfortunately, we haven't had any updates on that tip, and. No. But hopefully after we do this Facebook Live, somebody will see something and notice it and share it. It's been 32 years.
Yeah, 32 years.
But even, after that was shared on your Facebook page, a tip came in after all those years. So it's possible people still remember it. And it's a very distinct sketch. And we're not saying that person is a suspect, but police want to know who that person is.
Right.
Because he may have been in that area when that happened. And they would like to speak to him.
Do you remember we were talking about suspects, and a friend of Tamika's brother's was in jail or in prison and sent a letter to the family claiming to have information.
And Tamika and I talked about this as well, and we mentioned it in the story that an inmate had provided a name of somebody who may have been responsible. Unfortunately, that name didn't. Police weren't able to sort of connect the dots there in that name.
Yeah.
But Vera is certain that there's somebody alive today who knows exactly what happened.
Yeah, I mean, there are multiple people. It seems just from we have this composite. We have somebody that submits a tip. When we do this in 2017, the end of 2017. There's no reason to think that somebody out there doesn't have the right information.
Right.
I think in our spotlight that it was mentioned that the tip that came in from the inmate and friend was good information. It just wasn't enough to create, to end in an arrest. And there may have even been, I don't want to say too much because I don't know what all
what's out there
is real. I mean, some of this information comes from other sources, that's not the sheriff's office. But sometimes people have information and they are only willing to give it up if it's going to benefit them.
Right. That happens quite a bit.
It happens quite a bit. Yeah. And if they're not going to get anything out of it, whether it's a reward or a reduced sentence or something like that, then they clam up and they refuse to cooperate. And I, those things happen a lot in cases.
And police need to have a solid case because it does nobody any good for them to try to, go after a certain person they might believe is the suspect, and it turns out that they may have an alibi. And then...
Right. And you certainly can't have somebody on the stand testifying that, that's the guy that did it, or you think that's what he's going to say, and then he gets on the stand and he says, I don't.
Absolutely.
I don't
and that
remember.
creates an incredible amount of more heartache. So police need to, and they're right in this, they need to have an airtight case in order to go forward, and that's what's needed. That's why it's so important for whoever. I mean, if you were a witness, if you remember that area, if it wasn't that long ago, what I mean?
No,
1987.
It was.
It's 32 years ago, but still, I mean,
there's a lot of people that are still in the city that were here back then,
and maybe still living in that area who remember this case and how much publicity it got back then, because we're talking even Tampa Bay Times picked it up.
Right.
So
and there were a couple other articles. They were all the same article, but they were picked up by different outlets throughout the state. And I think the reason they picked it up was because it was the sister's dream that led to it, and then the family finding it. I don't know if that hadn't been the case, if anybody else would have picked it up.
Because she was in advanced stages of decomposition. And I do want to so this part that we talked about with Tamika as well and the detective, I like to tell people exactly what happened to the victim and how they died, because I think it's important for people to know the kind of murderer who is out there that could do this to another person. Vera died of blunt force trauma. Essentially, that means she was beaten to death.
Right.
There were no signs of gunshots. Right. There may have been other trauma on her body, but police didn't want to share that part just because she was so in advanced stages of decomposition that it was hard to tell. But not only
couldn't tell if she was sexually assaulted.
They couldn't tell
because of the decomposition.
Exactly. So, exactly. But it was possible.
It's possible.
But we know for sure that it was blunt force trauma. Again, like beaten to death. And then this person, whoever did this, rolled her up in a carpet and left her in the woods. Just dumped her body in the woods.
Right.
And so this is the person who, after 32 years, has not been caught. And that's the point of doing these cases, because these are more than just files in a vault, that are collecting dust.
These are real people.
These are real people that are affecting a lot of different families, and it's also a reminder that somebody got away with murder.
Exactly. And we talk about it more, I think, in the podcast that you guys did, which is you can go to actionnewsjax.com/Project Cold Case and see the podcast and listen to them in their entirety. But I remember talking about DNA evidence. You've got this carpet wrapped up. She's wrapped up in her carpet pad or whatever it is, and we're that might be a great place for DNA. And then you start to realize that where did that carpet come from? Who threw it out in the woods?
Right.
Who was sleeping on it in the woods before Vera was wrapped up in it? There might be a lot of DNA on that.
Absolutely.
That doesn't belong to her.
But then it was out in the elements for so long.
It was out in the elements.
And it becomes more complicated. So that's why it's so important for witness testimony.
It really is. We hear so much about DNA technology and now genetic genealogy and all of these other tools, which is exactly what they are. They're tools, but none of those things should be the only thing used, to solve a murder. And that's why it is still so important to have people come forward with information that they have. I was going to mention that Tamika first reached out to us in February of 2016, and we and so this has been in our office now for 3 years, trying to find any way we can to help. It started with putting her picture up on our Faces of Unsolved Homicide page, which are these pictures you see behind Lorena and I. And then it went to the Spotlight, and then it went to our Action News Jax partnership, and it had a podcast. And then we also, that same year, December 2017, we did a billboard campaign, and we put up these billboards all across the city from December, January, February, and March. And we didn't want to just have one victim, because there's so many. It was hard to choose one. So what we wanted to do was we wanted people to see a grouping of victims that hopefully they could relate to, maybe look like somebody they know or a friend or family, and then direct them back to our website where they could view and submit information on cases or submit cases. And Vera Sullivan was one of the victims that we had on that billboard, which we know generated tips and some of the other cases that were featured on there. Again, those tips come in, they add a great deal to the investigation. It's not always enough, to bring resolution and an arrest, but every bit of information is one step closer to that.
Ryan, what do you think if we talk about how Tamika's life changed after that day?
Yeah.
Because she essentially became an orphan because her father, a few years later, also died. I think she was 11 at the time.
She was 11 when her dad died.
Both her parents.
She had siblings, but her siblings were from a previous relationship that her mother had. And so after her mother dies, her siblings go live with other family because it's just her and her dad now, and her dad is not the same father to her siblings. And then at 11, he dies. And, I was 31 when my dad was killed, which is way too young to lose a parent. But we see it, all the time, people losing parents at young ages. But can you imagine being 7
Orphaned
and then 11 and not having a parent? Somewhere in her support system, I hope there was somebody there, that helped her out, because to view her, to meet with her and talk to her today, she's an amazing, strong woman, and you wouldn't know that she had to go through those trials as a young child.
Yeah, she really did. Obviously, I know that she thinks about her mom every day.
Yeah.
But speaking with her, I can tell that she tried her best to try to overcome it and become a productive member of society, which she is.
She is.
And I really enjoyed speaking with her because I could just. I can't imagine everything that she went through, and still she had such poise and remembered so many details, and really is she's a woman who wants justice for her mom.
And she talks about in your story, that the things that her mom didn't get to see.
Right.
She
didn't get to see her get married.
See her get married.
Yeah.
She has children. Tamika has children. And. They've never able to meet their grandmother, or grandfather, on that side. It's heartbreaking and it's sad.
The ripple effect that
the long
term,
Tamika's doing so good. I'm sure that there are days where she just breaks down,
as I'm sure it happens to you as well.
Absolutely. And but to see the strength that she has, to see what she's been able to accomplish. I remember when she first reached out. She didn't have a picture of her mom available, and we kept, hey, can we get a picture? Can you find somebody in the family that has a picture? She eventually was able to provide us a picture, and it just, when you're 7, your responsibility is not to be collecting all the photos of your mother, that everyone in the family has. I think, for the interview that she provided for the Spotlight on our website. She was emancipated at 16 years old, which means she's an adult at that point. There is nobody that is making decisions for her legally. She doesn't need anybody to make decisions for her legally. And that's, not a situation that a 16-year-old should have to be in.
It's completely unfair and just tragic that somebody robbed her of the opportunity to grow up with a mom, and to have her mom present in milestones in her life. And that's why, honestly, I think this is so important to talk about. And these are very difficult details to talk about, but they're important for people to know. People need to know that this happened and is still going on in our community. And we need people to step up.
Yeah, and nobody has been held accountable. One of the suspects that was looked at in this case, and I don't know, how his name came up or whatever. There obviously wasn't enough information to prove that he killed Vera, but one of the suspects is in prison for killing someone else at a later time. So that tells you how important it is. If that was the man that killed Vera Sullivan, that next murder could have been stopped.
Exactly. That's the importance of this. I mean, if these people could do this once, there's no stopping them in doing it again. In fact, I would say that if they believe they got away with it once, they could get away with it again, and this is probably the mindset of a lot of people out there who are capable of doing this kind of thing. Yeah. So we need to be able to stop that.
We're talking about bad people doing very bad things, and why would they not think they could do it again? If they can get away with it once, then they can keep going. We have, like I said, Vera's case in our on our Faces of Unsolved Homicide page. We have it in our database as well. Just for people out there watching, database.projectcoldcase.org. We have 15,000 cases in that database now, from around the country, but
not just
the bulk of them,
yeah,
from Florida, over 5,000 of them in Florida alone, and right around 1,500 in Jacksonville. But that's one of the things, one of the tools we like to use so that maybe somebody that's not watching this or lives out of town can find that database and search. Maybe they have information on Vera Sullivan. And, sometimes you may not know the victim's name, but we want them to be able to search by year, by location, by date range, just in case. Any attempt that we can get to get somebody to call us with or to go forward with information. Typically we don't ask them to come forward to us. I mean, we'd prefer you call. In this case, if you have information on Vera Sullivan's 1987 murder, call the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office at 904-630-0500, or Crime Stoppers, which you can remain anonymous and be eligible for a reward, and that's 866-845-TIPS. And just remember, though, with those Crime Stoppers, you can remain anonymous.
Yes, their call center is in Canada. It's not even in this country, and
they'll never know it's you. But make sure you give them as much information as possible, because there's no way for them to reach back. Well, I think there is a way. You can check a box on there that allows them to either email you or contact you if they need more information.
A lot of people get confused. They're like, well, if there's a reward, don't they need my information to give me the reward? There's a way around that. I mean, I'm not exactly sure all the details, but there's a way that you can still remain anonymous and still claim your reward if your tip leads to an arrest.
As soon as your tip is submitted, they give you a code, like I don't know how many digit code, 8-digit code, and you write that down, and then Crime Stoppers board meets, I'm pretty sure monthly, and they review all the tips that came in and whether they led to an arrest or not. And when they say you're eligible for up to $3,000, what that means is if you call in a tip on a car burglary, you're probably not going to get $3,000, but they may give you $500 or $100 or whatever it is.
If it's a high-profile case, that has
but if you call in a tip that leads to an arrest on a rape or a murder, there's a good chance you're going to be looking at a $3,000 payout. And
their organization depends on keeping people anonymous. Otherwise, people will never call them.
That's right.
Then they would cease to exist, because then they don't. You know what I mean? Like they need to keep people anonymous. Otherwise, they can't do what they do.
Yeah, they would never. They'd never be able to succeed if at one time they ignored that and turned in the name. But then I think a month, the next month after they've had their board meeting, you check back on the website or you call the crime number again and you give them that code and they tell you, your tip led to an arrest. Go to X bank, and there's been an account set up. Here's the account information. You just go make the withdrawal, and that's your money. They never ask you at the bank for your ID. You just, that's it. And it could obviously get a bad person off the street. So
Right.
I certainly hope that people will.
That we'll believe it. I mean, there are a lot of rumors out there, a lot of people with misinformation, but it really is anonymous, and hopefully people will use it. I wanted to know, did we have any questions yet, or any comments?
Tamika said hi.
Tamika.
She's watching. Thank you for watching, Tamika.
Yes.
We hope that as you know, we hope that we're able to help. I mean, she's
Yes.
one of the most appreciative survivors we deal with, and
Absolutely.
she's been in the office for other things, and we, like I said, between the database, our Faces page, our spotlights, our partnership with you, this Facebook Live, we're not going to stop looking for Vera
Right.
Sullivan's killer, and I think Tamika knows that, and I think and I know she's appreciative of that. I know it's a hard time for you, especially right now, Tamika. It's right around the anniversary of your mother being found. I guess that's Friday or Thursday or Friday would be the 32nd anniversary. So just know we're here for you. You can call our office if you need to chat. You can stop in if you want to come by. We'll just keep doing things like this until we get word that somebody's been identified and caught and arrested for this case.
And I'm glad we're mentioning your mom's name, Vera Sullivan. People need to know her name, and they need to know who she was and what happened to her. So, and all the victims that we covered too. And
yeah, we've talked about this so many times. I mean, 1987 was not a time of social media. It wasn't a time really of 24-hour news source.
No,
it was
no surveillance cameras.
Surveillance cameras, DNA, none of that stuff that we depend on now to really assist in investigations and help identifying people. I wasn't there in 1987, and I remember when Tamika first submitted this case to us. If you just Googled Vera Sullivan, you wouldn't find anything.
No.
And
now quite a few things will come up.
Yeah, now there's multiple web pages that will come up.
There's a podcast.
There's a podcast. All of these things, and that's it's our way of just trying to make sure that people understand that Vera Sullivan was an asset to our community. She was a mother. I think she was a mother of 5.
Yeah.
She was a wife. She was well loved at her job. From my understanding, the Seminole Club was a place where it was always the same people that came in there.
You had regulars.
It wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't Chili's where it's a different person.
Yeah, I think you needed a membership, right?
You had to have a membership. You had to be invited. It was it was a whole big thing, and so she was. Was well loved by the people that came in there. I remember there was in one of those stories there was a reward information. That back then I think they had a $2,500 reward, which again, in '87. There were people that cared about Vera Sullivan then, and we don't want her family to think that there's not people that care about her now. We didn't have the pleasure of knowing her when she was alive, but we want the community to know what a loss that was, and try to band together and bring some information that'll bring a resolution to the case.
If you're inclined to do so, please share this Facebook Live, and I don't know if we can bring up the Vera's photo again, so people could take another look and see if they remember her, and in the neighborhood, maybe you live in that area or know people who live in that area. Go ahead and take a look at her spotlight, or take a look at our story on Action News Jax, and listen to the podcast. And there's a lot of information there in the podcast, because we're not able to put such a long story on TV.
45 minutes or
or like an hour.
An hour. Yeah, I mean that podcast includes all of your interviews with me, with Sergeant Jansen, and with Tamika.
They're all sort of back to back.
Yeah, and that segment that we showed that was on air was, I think it was a 3.5 minute segment. That was a long segment.
And it was long for TV because usually we get less time, but I was able to make it sort of a longer story.
But you have to cut a lot of the interview to be able to fit into 3.5 minutes. So there's a lot of valuable information in that podcast. And in our spotlight, and
may jog somebody's memory.
Yeah, Google Vera Sullivan's name now. There's information out there that might be able to help solve this case.
Could we put the sketch up again one more time?
Yeah. And if you remember, this is what this man was sought for questioning,
Right.
thought that he may have information, but that was 1987.
Right.
So, you know a guy that looked like that in 1987. Again, Crime Stoppers, the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
Again, this was by Clansell T. Brown Park in the Moncrief Road area. This man was seen around that area. Not that he's a suspect, but he's sort of a person of interest that police want to question. And he may very well be alive today, and or maybe family members or whatnot. Maybe you remember somebody who looked like this.
We talk about this each time we're on here.
Mm-hmm.
People are scared to get involved sometimes when they have information, whether it's this gentleman or somebody else.
Which is understandable.
32 years later,
mm-hmm.
I think it's time to come forward if you have that information.
Absolutely.
I think, in these cases that are this old, we don't know if this person's still alive that did this. We don't know if he's still physically capable of doing the things
Mm-hmm.
he obviously was doing back then 32 years ago. If it's Crime Stoppers or if it's JSO,
just call it in.
Call it in, and it's time. This family deserves it. Tamika deserves it. Her children that never got to meet their grandmother deserve it.
They deserve answers.
They do, and we're gonna cut this one a little bit short today because Lorena has a very busy day. It's election day.
It's election day. I gotta get to work, and it's gonna be a long day.
And so we have an election for mayor, sheriff, and some city council seats.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And you're covering all of that tonight as the polls start to close and this afternoon. So
I'll be at work
you've got
shortly.
A busy day. But I want to thank you for coming in again today. We'll get together. We try to get you in once a month to
definitely
get in another case. So we'll start looking at other cases that you've done. Mm-hmm. We've been getting a lot of emails and calls from other families that want their loved one's case on the news and on our site. So we're always talking about those. We've had emails and text messages flying back and forth all week about those.
You really start to realize how much of a problem it is, and so hopefully we can do something positive, and if we could solve one case, I mean that is huge. If we could help solve one case, because detectives will solve it, but if we can sort of provide some information for them to get there, that'd be great. And it's up to you, whoever's watching and has some information. Please call it in.
Please. So thanks for joining us today. We'll be back next week with another guest, and we'll have Lorena back soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you.